Which second round pick is making the all rookie team, and which undrafted college star landed with the perfect team on a two-way deal?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Friday and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host for today's show, Andy Patton, and you are joining at the place to get your college basketball content every single day throughout the offseason, Monday through Friday. In season, we're typically given 6 shows a week, so check it out if you have not yet. And folks, you can listen to the show ad-free on Amazon Music for those of you who did not know. Want to also give a special shout out to our everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, and remind everybody that you can that this show is sponsored by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code Locked On College, and folks will get $20 off your first purchase. Well, the NBA draft is done in the rearview mirror. The two-day spectacle is over. Many players have already signed their two-way deals or Exhibit 10 contracts. We're going to break down the best and worst of the round, our favorite picks, maybe picks we wouldn't have made. We'll also talk about some undrafted free agents who we think ended up in good spots, some players we were surprised maybe didn't hear their name called among those first 59 players. And then we're going to close out the show talking about a new rule change, an added game to the schedule for college basketball starting in the 26-27 season, how that might be a savior for the long-standing multi-team events. We'll get to that at the end of the show. Before we get into our superlatives for the second round, I do want to just give a little breakdown of how these picks shook out from a international versus college perspective, as well as from a conference perspective. So there were 7 international players taken in the second round of the NBA draft. That would be Penda, Zikarsky, Markovic, Diawara, Tui, Ulbrich, and Niang. I know Ulbrich did play some college basketball in the Big West, and I know that Alex Tui was committed to Gonzaga before he decided to stay in Australia and play out there, but those guys were all international players. That would be the second most if the internationals were a college basketball conference. Behind the SEC, there were 8 players from the SEC selected in the second round of the draft. 2 from Tennessee in Chaz Lanier and Jemai Meshack, 2 from Florida in the 2 guards that weren't Walter Clayton Jr., that'd be Will Richard and Elijah Martin. 2 from Kentucky in Kobe Brea and Amari Williams. So much concern that, well, Kentucky under Mark Pope's not going to be getting draft picks the way that John Calipari was. And sure, these guys were both late second round picks, but still had 2 guys taken in the draft. And then the other 2 were Janai Broome from Auburn and Adu Thiero from Arkansas. So 8 from the SEC, 7 from international. That already, those 2 combined are a little over half the players taken in the second round. 4 from the ACC, which is Sion James, Maxime Reynaud, Jameer Watkins, and Tyrese Proctor. 2 from Duke, and then, of course, Florida State and Stanford. 3 from the Big East, Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton, Cam Jones from Marquette, Micah Peavy from Georgetown. 2 from the A10. Shout out the A10, right? Brashear Fleming, first pick in the second round, going to Phoenix, coming from, of course, St. Joe's, and then Max Scholga, the second to last pick in the draft, going to the Boston Celtics, coming from VCU. 2 from the Big Ten, Brooks Barnheiser from Northwestern, John Tanji from Wisconsin. 1 from the Big 12, Javon Small from West Virginia. 1 from the Mountain West, Kobe Sanders from Nevada. 1 from Conference USA, that'd be Taelon Peter from Liberty. All right, getting more into the superlatives here. My first superlative, most likely second round pick to make the all rookie team. And Isaac and I talked about this, projected this kind of before the draft actually happened. And at the time, I had laid out Kobe Brea as a player that I think had some future all-star potential. I still like Kobe Brea. I like his landing spot, but I'm a little bit more inclined to actually go with a different pick here in terms of who's going to be an immediately impactful player who might make an all-rookie team right away. I'm going with Ryan Kalkbrenner. Kalkbrenner taken 34th overall by the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets traded their starting center, former Duke big man Mark Williams. They traded him to Phoenix on the first day of the draft So they cleared a room for a player to come in and potentially compete for minutes right away at the center position. And then they go ahead and get a guy in Ryan Kalkbrenner, who's one of the oldest players in the draft class, who's kind of been labeled as somebody who has a high floor, maybe not like a super high ceiling necessarily, but has a high floor and is NBA ready right now for a team that just traded their starting center. Like the pieces all fit together well for Kalkbrenner. Now, to be clear, Charlotte in that trade acquired Jusuf Nurkic, who is likely, assuming he is healthy, going to be the starting center right away for the Charlotte Hornets, and he probably should be. But Nurkic has a history of injury issues, and he has been kind of up and down in his production. Plus, Charlotte is a rebuilding team at this point. I mean, they're trading Mark Williams. They're making moves that kind of indicate they're kind of building towards the future. So Nurkic is probably not a long-term piece for Charlotte, and it wouldn't surprise me if they look to try to deal him at the trade deadline, or if it was just going in a direction where Kalkbrenner was kind of knocking on the door to play right away. He's going to get big minutes. I don't know that Kalk is a starter for Charlotte much, if at all, in his rookie season, but I wouldn't be surprised if he plays enough to put himself in the conversation as an all-rookie second teamer, all-rookie honorable mention, which doesn't happen very often for second-round picks. Best team fit is my next superlative. I'm going with Max Shulga, the 57th pick in the draft, going to the Boston Celtics. Shulga's a veteran guy, spent multiple years in college. Obviously played at VCU, had made that transfer to Villanova, then changed his mind and came back to VCU, stayed for another year. Just a big guard, veteran guy, has kind of proven that he can do a little bit of everything. He's a good shooter and he's a good playmaker. He was somebody that was kind of on mock drafts occasionally in like the very end of the draft, but a lot of folks were starting to say like, hey, why are we overlooking him? Like, obviously the competition level in the A10 is always a concern, and it's part of the reason most believe that Rasheer Fleming fell out of the first round and was the first pick of the second round. But Shulga really proved it with his ability. He looked good in the combine. He looked good in workouts, reportedly, according to different sources. So I'm not surprised at all that Shulga did sneak into the draft, and I think he's a really solid fit for a Boston team that's going to be without Jason Tatum this year, that's going to need some more playmakers, need some guys to be able to fit in. And I'm not saying Shulga is just going to replace anybody on that roster necessarily, but getting a veteran guy with one of your final picks in the draft who potentially can contribute right away is always a win. And this feels like a very Boston pick, and I think a player who's going to look really good in that Celtics green this year and potentially beyond. And then my last one here is my best value pick in the second round of the 2025 NBA draft. I'm going Tyrese Proctor out of Duke, one of many Duke players, 5 in total that were selected in this draft. 3 of them went in the first round. 3 of them went in the top 10 of this draft. Of course, Cooper Flagg, Kon Knippel, and Kaman Malawach. And then Sion James went early in the second round. And then Tyrese Proctor goes 49th to the Cleveland Cavaliers. Most places had Proctor in the mid-30s. You didn't see a lot of mock drafts that had him later than 45. So for him to fall to 49 is great value for Cleveland. I see Tyrese Proctor. He's got a little bit of Andrew Nembhard in him. I'm quoting my good friend and friend of the podcast, Cam Salerno, who wrote this in his CBS Sports kind of review of the draft. I see it. Proctor's a bigger guard. He's kind of comfortable playing on or off the ball. He works hard defensively, and I think is somebody you could kind of put on good offensive guards, especially if he's got a size advantage. He can kind of make life a little hard for them, bully them a little bit. So I like this fit for Proctor. I think it's a less pressure situation where the Cleveland's got Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland in the backcourt. They have some depth there. Proctor can come in and maybe not play a big role right away, maybe even be a two-way guy or a guy who plays some time in the G League, but he's also ready to help right away. And so I think this is a good fit for Cleveland, getting a bigger guard who can potentially step in right away if needed, but also a guy who still has some room to grow and develop. And I think is in a situation where he'll be able to do that without a ton of pressure to contribute right away for the Cavs. So I like this fit for Proctor. I think this was a great pick by Cleveland. But who's the biggest surprise player that was taken in the draft? We're going to talk about that, as well as which undrafted stars landed in ideal spots on two-way contracts, that and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, have you ever decided last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize, I want to be in the stands tonight. That's exactly where Gametime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without all the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group of friends to come with you. Gametime makes that all possible. And Gametime makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app, they actually drop the closer you get to first pitch. And they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Gametime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On MLB, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Speaking of exciting games, the Detroit Tigers hosting the Minnesota Twins in an AL Central battle on Saturday. It's bobblehead night out at Comerica Park. You can get tickets for $30, and there's some tickets that are right on the field down the third base line for just $51. So folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets by using Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, folks, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, and we're still recapping the second round of the 2025 NBA Draft. More superlatives coming your way. We're going to talk about the biggest surprise player who was selected. We're going to talk about who maybe wouldn't have been my choice at that spot in the draft, and then we're going to talk about a surprise player who was not drafted and our favorite two-way fit out of this class so far. Again, more two-way contracts to be signed as we're recording this on Friday, late morning Pacific time. We'll start with our surprise player drafted. I don't think, to put it this way, I don't think it's a surprise to many people who we are picking as our surprise player selected in the second round, and that would be Taelon Peter, who went number 54 overall to the Indiana Pacers. And if you were somebody who was following the pre-draft process, gobbling up the mock drafts, whether it was from sources like ESPN or CBS or Yahoo, or whether you were, reading fan mocks, anything like that, any amount of NBA draft coverage, it's pretty likely you didn't see much of the name Taelon Peter. In fact, many of you right now probably still don't even know where Taelon Peter went to college, because he went to college at Liberty. Not a lot, even the diehards probably weren't watching a ton of Conference USA basketball last year. And if you weren't, you would have missed. Taelon Peter was a very good player. It's still a surprise because he was not on mock drafts. He wasn't somebody that had a, top 100 big boards frequently didn't have him on the list. I know Sam Vecini's outstanding, extraordinarily detailed draft report had 75 players on it. I know that Taelon Peter was not on that list as well. But here's the thing. Here's the reason that this pick could make some sense for Indiana. Last year at Liberty, Taelon Peter shot 45.3% from three. That's your reasoning right there. I mean, we're talking about a 6'4" guard, so he's a little undersized, but he's got decent positional size, and he's a lights out three-point shooter. This was on 5 attempts per game last year. He was also an incredibly efficient 2-point scorer as well. Granted, that was not on a super high volume of attempts, mostly getting out in transition, scoring easy buckets around the rim. Part of the reason this is a surprise too is not only that he's coming from Liberty, but he's only played 41 career Division I games. He played 6 D1 games at Tennessee Tech back in the 2020-21 season. That was when Jalen Suggs was a freshman. Gonzaga went to the national championship. That's how long ago that was. And then he played junior college ball for a couple of years, came back to D1 this past season at Liberty. So the player's only got 41 D1 games under his belt. So you're really banking on that three-point shot. You're really banking on him being able to impact the game at that level. It's a bit of a dart throw. I mean, we're talking about one of the last players picked in the draft. So certainly at that point, it's hard to criticize any pick because, most of these guys are probably not going to make a lasting impact in the league. Some of them might stick around for a little bit, but if he doesn't, it's not like it's a huge waste of a pick necessarily. I mean, certainly if one of the few players who goes after him ends up having a phenomenal career, Indiana fans might look back on this, but ultimately it's one of those things where you shoot your shot and you take your pick, and this is who they went with. My honorable mention here is Jemai Meshack, who was the last player picked in the draft, goes to Memphis. But this isn't really a big surprise to me. I mean, Meshack wasn't on a ton of boards, but it's the last pick in the draft. You're taking a guy who fits Memphis's culture as like a tough on-ball defender. And he played at Tennessee, and there's going to Memphis. So all that kind of tracks for me. Now, speaking of Tennessee, not my choice is the pick that the Detroit Pistons made at number 37 overall, and that was Chaz Lanier. And it's not even really about Chaz Lanier as much as the kind of player Detroit was looking for at 37 was a high-scoring guard who can shoot the three and space the floor. And they could have taken Kobe Bryant. And on almost every mock that I was reading, most people had Lanier ahead of Kobe Bryant. So I may be in the minority here in feeling like I would have much rather had Kobe Bryant than Chaz Lanier. And they're not the same player. They're not the same player. Kobe Brea is bigger. Kobe Brea is a better three-point shooter. They're both excellent, but Kobe Brea is a more high-volume three-point shooter with a higher percentage. Lanier is more versatile in his scoring. He can do different things with the basketball, but in my mind, a player you're taking in the second round, you're not looking for a player who's going to be an on-ball creator, a playmaker. Like that's not. You're looking for a catch-and-shoot guy or a 3-and-D player. Yeah, Kobe Brea, I would worry about a little bit about the defense, but I would worry about the defense with Chaz Lanier too. And Kobe Brea is a bigger, better three-point shooter who I think has more defensive upside. So to me, if I was at 37 with Detroit and I was feeling like this is the type of player I wanted, I'd have probably gone with Kobe Brea. I think there's an argument that they could have considered Micah Peavy or Tyrese Proctor ahead of Chaz Lanier. Now, those guys are different enough players. Like Proctor's maybe not a great fit specifically with Detroit, even though I think he might be a better player. And again, it sounds like I'm bagging on Lanier. I'm not. I think he's a fine player. I think he deserved to be drafted. I think he has a chance to carve out a decent career. But again, this is why I titled it not like worst pick or anything like that. I titled it not my choice because even if I was looking for this type of player, Lanier's not the guy I would have taken here. Next up, two more superlatives to get to: our surprise undrafted player and then our best two-way fit. Surprise undrafted player for me was Ryan Nembhard. And I think, most mock drafts were kind of 50-50 on Nembhard. There wasn't a whole lot of like shocking, oh my gosh, how did that guy not get picked? The way that there was with Justin Edwards a few years ago, who was, the top 5 high school recruit who had a down year at Kentucky, but still it was a shock that he didn't get drafted at all. Like those kind of things are much more surprising. This year was like, oh, there's a few guys like Ryan Nembhard's probably the most notable, maybe Hunter Salas, Caleb Love, Mark Sears, guys like that. But like none of them were like, oh, wow, I was stunned that guy didn't get drafted. I think Nembhard, for me at least, was probably the biggest surprise out of that group. He signs a 2-way contract with the Dallas Mavericks. One thing we've kind of heard is that a lot of these second-round picks, while teams are trying to make picks, were negotiating with agents who were already kind of, getting offers for second-round or 2-way contracts. So part of me wonders if Nembhard felt comfortable, like Dallas is a team I want to go to. Obviously, they got Cooper Flagg, they got Anthony Davis. They're going to be Kyrie Irving's got the injury, so they're going to be an opportunity for me to potentially play right away. Like maybe he just wanted to go to Dallas, and that was the reason that he didn't get picked. Maybe not. I don't want to say I know anything definitively on that. But also for Nembhard, I mean, his size is a huge limiting factor. He's got a 6'2" wingspan. He's barely 6 feet tall. He's a tremendous passer, the best in college basketball. 4-1 assist to turnover ratio last year. Averaged nearly 10 assists per game. His 344 assists was the 5th most in college basketball history in a single season. His brother's been a phenomenal NBA player. So there's a lot of things that I think were going in a positive way for Nembhard. So for him to not get picked was a little bit of a surprise, but he ends up in a very solid spot in Dallas with the Mavericks. Again, Hunter Salas is another one I'd mentioned of like kind of surprised, but he probably should have stayed in the draft last year, returning to school and having his 3-point shooting plummet in his final season at Wake Forest, I think really hurt his draft stock. Now, I mentioned Nembhard and his fit being solid in Dallas. He's not also my pick for the best 2-way fit. That would feel like cheating. So we're going with a different one here. Another older veteran guard who I think could have been drafted, but finds himself in a quality spot, and that's Caleb Love. Caleb Love, of course, from Arizona via North Carolina. Love joining the Portland Trailblazers on a 2-way contract. I am a Blazers fan, so I am happy about this. I know the Caleb Love experience quite well. We talk about it a ton on the show, but the Blazers traded Anthony Simons, who is their only good 3-point shooter. They desperately need outside shooting. They used their draft pick on a center from China, which was very shocking for a team that already has Donovan Clingan on the roster. So they didn't have a second-round pick, so they needed to get some shooting. Is Caleb Love the best pure shooter that they could have had? Probably not. But is he somebody who, when he gets hot, can absolutely, unquestionably be an impact player at the NBA level? Yeah, I think so. And again, we're talking about a 2-way contract. If you have enough skill that you could make the NBA, you're worth a 2-way contract. I like this fit. I think this is a team that could legitimately use Caleb Love more than many other teams that might have signed him to a two-way deal. I could see him balling out at the Chiles Center, the home of the Portland Pilots, which is where the Blazers G League affiliate plays. I could see him being a baller for the Rip City Remix, and I could see him making the NBA roster. He kind of replaces Delano Banton, who's a free agent, who kind of had that similar role as a fringe player on Portland's roster. I think Caleb Love fits there nicely, and I'm excited to have him in Portland. I think this is a good fit for him and for the Blazers. Well, that's putting a bow on our NBA draft content here. We may talk about it periodically over the next couple of weeks, but that's the big NBA draft content is done and dusted now. As we're going to move on, college basketball teams have one more game to play with starting in the 2026-27 season. So fans of MTEs can breathe a big sigh of relief. We'll get into why in just a second. All right, folks, segment 3, still Andy Patton, still Locked On College Basketball Podcast, closing out the show and the week, talking about a new rule change from the NCAA D1 Council, which has approved an increase from 31 games in a season to 32 starting in the 26-27 season. All this reporting came from the great Matt Norlander of CBS Sports. A couple notes on this. The rules have been in place for 31 games being the maximum number of games you can play in a single season for about 20 years. For 19 years at this point. So it'll be 20 years after this upcoming season. And then that will expand to 32 games. That will include non-D1 opponents. So obviously you still have your exhibition games, but if you play a D3 school or an NAIA school in the regular season, that will count against your 32 games. So that's something to keep an eye on for teams. And it's also worth pointing out that teams are not required to play 32 games. If you want to only play 31, you can do that. You don't have to get to the full 32. Most teams are going to play as many games as they are capable of playing. It would be a surprise to see too many teams standing pat at 31 when they're able to play 32. But it is, again, an important caveat to these rules at this point. A couple different reasons for this. Money, always a reason. And I think especially in the post-house settlement era, where teams are desperate to find every single revenue stream that they possibly can. If you can get another home game where you can get more ticket sales, more merchandise sales, more concession sales, that's more money in your pocket, more money you can potentially use to spend on your student athletes through NIL. Obviously, more games is more home games, potentially the more opportunity for more neutral site games where you can get some money out of that too. If you can go to a bigger arena and a bigger place to play. And for smaller schools, more games means more opportunity for bigger schools to potentially buy games with them and send them out some cash to bring them out to campus and play that way. So I think money in the post-house settlement era is almost always going to be the primary driver for any rule changes or anything like that we see. That's not a criticism. It's not a bad thing necessarily. I think more college basketball is a good thing. And so even if that is part of the factor, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing, especially because one of the other positives that comes out of this is it's going to help MTEs, multi-team events. This is your Battle for Atlantis. This is your, all the other great MTEs that we've seen in the past. Maui Invitational, Battle for Atlantis are kind of the two stalwart, heavy ones. ESPN Events has done quite a few of these as well. Rady Children's is a more recent one. But look, we're talking like the big 8-team, 3-game multi-team events have been kind of on their deathbed a little bit. We've talked about it a few times of like, is this the end of MTEs? And the two biggest drivers for that kind of fear were the fact that conference scheduling was getting more and more bloated. Teams, bigger conferences were going from 16 or 18 conference games to 20 conference games, which was limiting your ability to make an impact in the non-conference. And you'd buy it, 5 or 6 games, you'd have 20 conference games. Suddenly you only have 4 or 5 big games left. And if you play in an MTE, like you're sucking up most of those games. So I think that adding an extra game will allow these more teams to be comfortable contributing or participating, I should say, in things like the Maui Invitational and the Battle for Atlantis and these types of big 3-game, 8-team MTEs. Obviously, that kind of ties into the other reasoning that we think they're adding an extra game here, which is because of those bloated conference schedules. And we mentioned this recently when talking about the Big 12. They had scaled up to 20 conference games. They decided pretty quickly to scale back to 18 conference games. So that is a good thing for the Big 12, more of non-conference games potentially in the future for them. But the Big 10 is still 20 games, and there's still some other bigger conferences that are at 18 or 20 games. That just makes it more difficult for those teams to schedule marquee non-conference games, which is what folks want to see. And another thing that folks want to see that we are hoping to see more of out of this change is non-conference games happening in January or February. We've seen this the last couple of years, Duke, Illinois last year. This upcoming season, it'll be Duke, Michigan. We'll be playing a non-conference game in February. That should be an extremely fun one. We also just recently, as in like in the last 2 days, got a report that Baylor and Louisville, Scott Drew and Pat Kelsey, are going to play a non-conference game this year in either January or February. I believe February is when that game is going to take place. So we're starting to see this. ACC Big 12 scheduling a game in February is not something that used to happen all that often. In fact, these January, February games have been historically quite rare. I know John Calipari has been pretty willing to play them, and Mark Few has been willing to play them. And we've in fact seen Gonzaga Memphis used to play frequently in the non-conference. And then when the WCC added BYU a little over a decade ago, Gonzaga kind of stopped playing in those mid-season games because their schedule was a little bit more full. And then BYU left, and then Gonzaga's now played. They played Kentucky at the Rupp Arena in February last 2 years ago. So we're starting to see them do that a little bit more. Be interested to see once they get in the Pac-12 if that's something they continue to do or not. But having this extra game, I think, makes it more likely that we will see that. And it's such a fun thing. I mean, again, from the Gonzaga perspective, it made sense because their conference schedule was not super competitive. This is why Memphis was doing it under Coach Calipari as well. But I think we're going to continue to see this. And that's a good thing. If adding an extra game results in the MTEs, I don't think that like Atlantis or Maui, they're not going to die, but like we're starting to see concern of like, oh, they're getting mostly mid-major schools. They're not getting a lot of the big time schools. After Danny Hurley got real butthurt about UConn going 0-3, he said like, we're never doing a 3-game MTE again. He might've been blowing smoke, but like there's some legitimacy to the idea of like these big schools were kind of burned out on these and not wanting to suck up 3 of their games playing these MTEs. So hopefully this will help alleviate some of that, but also it's going to help with the big event that has just recently kind of taken hold, which is of course the Players Era NIL Festival, which started last year in Las Vegas. This upcoming season, it ballooned up to 18 teams. And in 2026, the Players Era Festival is hoping to be a 32-team MTE. That's what they're saying now. Who knows what that's going to look like 18 or so months from now when that event rolls around. But if they want to be that big and they want to be a potential 4-team MTE, which is being discussed, this kind of rule change helps make that more palatable. A lot of teams would balk at joining an event that potentially had as many as 32 teams in it. But if you have an extra game, you can make it work. And of course, you're getting promised $1 million in NIL funds just for participating in the event. You're going to see a lot of teams be willing to do that. We'll have a longer conversation about this at some point, but a 32-team MTE that promises 4 games is starting to, if you're squinting, it's starting to look a little bit like a mini NCAA tournament of sorts. So I'm curious how much more that could grow, what that could look like, at what point the NCAA or somebody's going to stop on it, or at what point schools will start rejecting it. But it is definitely something to keep an eye on as the era of these MTEs, because of the House settlement, because of NIL, because of bloated conferences. This era for MTEs is dramatically different. And I think what these look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now is going to be completely different. And we've already seen dramatic changes. And I think that's going to continue to happen. So it is definitely something that college basketball fans will want to be prepared for, that these things are going to look a lot different in the coming years. It's going to wrap it up for me today here on Locked On College Basketball. Folks, thank you so much for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Of course, a special shout out to those everyday listeners. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend. Isaac and I will be back next week. We'll keep you up to date on more scheduling news as we get that, more recruiting updates as we start to see that coming in for the 2026 class as well. And then, of course, as it's going to be July very soon, we'll start to get into some of those team and conference previews for this upcoming season as well. Thanks again, folks. Have a fantastic weekend. As always, we want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes, 2 of their players selected in this draft. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. And until next time, peace out.